Good morning, everyone. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avagnoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World Collective Energy Share. I am just so tired this morning. But yeah, there's been a lot going on. Well, there's been a lot going on for me in the 3D, right? So there's a lot of change. Funny thing is, we were talking, Saturday night?
Gosh, was that Saturday night?
Yeah,
it was.
Saturday night. And I know it feels like a month ago, but whatever. But the thing is, and really both of us sort of had this, it's like this, you said you were feeling lost.
Yeah, very lost. Very.
And I said, I didn't think I felt lost, but I think it's because it's a feeling like lost. We don't really have a word for it. It was like displacement or
limbo.
Yeah, limbo. And I did see a couple of people I've seen on social media asking, from a consciousness standpoint, does anybody else feel like they're sort of in stasis or limbo or whatever right now? And so, I apologize for yawning this morning.
It's like a different form of detachment.
Yeah, and it wasn't, because I said it wasn't like feeling lost. It was feeling like I don't know what to be. I don't know what to do.
I saw a quote, gosh, I don't even know from who or something, that talked about how we rely so much on doing something to change our frequency to raise our vibration. And that's why we're so attached to doing, is because we're not quite sure how to do it from a place of being.
Well, and we've been talking about that for months.
But I'd never really thought of it as that being what shifted the frequency. The actual act.
The doing.
Act.
Yeah.
And so that changed my understanding of how I look at doing versus being.
Yeah. Yeah. And and the funny part was, as we were talking about, I've had the last couple of weeks has been very full of doing things that just had to get done. Right.
Right.
And so, or that I chose to get done because it's, my daughter finished college and she needed to and she was moving home. So we needed to go move her. And then, we have our Kung Fu test coming up, and like all that kind of stuff. And that that's taken up a lot of time here in the 3D. And I've continued, doing my self-work and stuff, but it's almost like I'm going, well, am I distracting myself with all of this? But it just feels like, not that I'm distracting myself, but that I'm filling a space right now or something weird like that,
Holding the space.
Yeah. Which is funny because you think, and this is, I guess this is more examples of, doing from being, is I'm holding a space and I'm very expansive in that space, and yet I'm doing a whole lot of stuff. And I guess that could be the doing from the being, because all that stuff I have no attachment to. Like, it's so that's where the sort of lost feeling is. Like, good morning, Gloria. Good morning, Laurel. And so it's sort of like this feeling of all this stuff that, I'm in this space of being, and there's all the stuff that's going on that I'm even doing, right?
Right. It's almost like you're allowing that to happen simultaneous with the being.
Even if it looks very different, right?
Right.
Which is sort of a, then like I stop and I ask myself, like, well, how does this relate to the being? Like, it's so funny. It's like I'll stop and just question myself constantly.
It's almost like going through the motions, but having no attachment to the process or the outcome.
Exactly. Oh, you have me on again. Sorry. So, yeah.
Which I guess is, how it's supposed to be. You participate and you set your creation in motion, and it unfolds. There's no fear. There's no, it just is. It's your creation.
Except, you know, it's funny, we've been doing so much of this work and focus on um, uh, being and doing and choosing our presence free of propulsion, right? We talked about this a
Right.
little bit too, right? Um, that, okay, so now we've shifted ourselves to a place that all the things that we used to use as propulsion before are gone away, right?
Right.
So if we do that, then all of a sudden we feel a little bit floaty going, well, I'm not propelled, I'm just floating in space, right? No,
Right.
I do. But it's that remember, it's, I think we're in that, I feel like we're sort of maybe, and that's what we were talking about a little bit Saturday night, is I feel like we're a little bit in that space of figuring out how to be that, right? And how to do from being free of the propulsion of lack or exclusion or separation and duality.
Or
Yeah.
any fear.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's a challenging one because it feels so different that
Well, I think how we put it was it's like we're looking for the answer to the question. We don't even know what the question is.
right, because I said, I was like, I feel like I'm being in this place and I have this big question mark that's hanging over my head like in a cartoon bubble, right?
Right.
Question mark. Except I look at the question mark and I'm like, but I'm not even sure what the question is.
Right.
And it made me go back to thinking about, you know, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you know, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And, you know, where the answer was 42. The answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. But then they're like, but then what's the question? And it's sort of like that's where we are right now is, all right, we get it. We know it's an illusion, right?
Right.
And what I said, what we were talking about is it's almost like I feel a little bit Mary Poppinish, like I am Mary Poppins in that those parts of the movie where it's all cartoons around her and she's like, you know, and it's like everything in this whole reality feels cartoonish right now. And it
Right.
feels so abstract and it feels so um just not real. Like it's almost like I've totally separated my immersion from it in the way of believing it, that I just
Right.
look at it and go, yeah. And the question is, what's the question?
Right. Well, I find myself that whether it's a new level of detachment, but it's like or just a new level of observation to where things that I fell for or believed, I just look at it and go, oh, I just see that totally different now. And yeah, no, that's just not anything I'm interested in participating in, but I can sit in observation and be like, wow, and you're still buying into that, huh?
Right. And you know, it's funny you say that is because in the conversation that we had at dinner table last night, I, that's the feeling I had. Honestly, looking at now, I didn't even recognize it at the time, but as you said that, I was like, yeah, it was like, wow, okay. So you're
Right,
still buying into it as the cartoon.
right.
Um,
Well, and seeing how, in observation of someone interacting in a certain set of circumstances and seeing that they've made a conscious choice to create this versus this, or this, but still saying, oh, but this happened to me and I am, woe is me. And I can, it's the first time I've seen and felt that observation so clearly from that perspective of it could have just as easily been this.
right, just as easily. And
Right.
it's funny, it makes me now I'm thinking about the conversation we had Saturday night and what you were talking about on your end and you know, with your husband and stuff. And it's like I was thinking about that with my kids and my family, yeah, last night, the same kind of thing. And I was realizing that I do see it differently now. And so because it's almost like
Surrealness.
I
That's
realized,
what
yeah.
Gloria says.
I was like, what is that? Yeah. It was almost like I was there and everybody in the conversation wanted me to immerse myself in it.
Right.
Same
Right.
thing that happened with you, right? So it
Right.
wanted me to immerse myself in it. And I was just like, nah. Like
Right.
seriously.
Right.
And
And
I sat there and it wasn't like no judgment. There was no judgment. I had no judgment about it. I
it
was
was
simply like, nah, I don't feel, yeah, nope, don't need to. I can just observe. And I did, right? And it was almost like they got irritated, just like with your
right.
husband.
And it almost, it comes from a place of, it's such a free feeling
It
to
is, but then the
just
ego
be an
backs up.
observance versus the whole emotional charge around it
Yeah,
that draws you in at an unobservable position.
right. Well,
And
and then the ego then second question, second guesses it later on, right? Going,
right.
well,
Yeah.
should I have said something, or like, should I have done this? Well, as soon as the shoulds come in, I'm like, oh, there's the ego. Like,
Right.
I'm very uncomfortable with this. Very uncomfortable.
And I found it, the more I run into situations like that, the more I feel like this reality takes on more of like a facade, like a cardboard cutout playset.
Yeah.
And it loses that,
Yes.
it it loses that it loses, gosh, the realness to me that it used to have.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. And so and I sit there and then of course you second guess and you're like, well, should I immerse myself more, to show I care for this person, right?
Right.
Or
Right.
people. And that's what's going on. So like let's look at that. Yeah, Gloria says I've done that as I'm almost above watching.
Right.
And it's really interesting because at a collective level right now, it has so reared its head, right? Of you have to immerse yourself in this side or that side. You have to choose this, or if you don't do this, then you're this kind of person. And it's like, oh, you like, let me try to persuade you by pressing on those ego buttons and saying, oh, but you don't care about me if you don't do this, or you don't immerse yourself in this,
Right.
or if you don't. And that's going on all over right now. And it's so false. I think that's part of what it feels like as a cartoon, because I'm like,
Right.
really?
Well, and I sit back sometimes and I ask myself, what if everybody and everything was exactly like we wanted it to be? It really changes everything, because there's none of that victimhood, there's none of that yearning, there's none of that. It's like, I got exactly what I wanted.
And then the ego says, but now what do I do?
Right. Then it's like, well, but and wants to sit back and pout. But I mean, imagine the difference in how everything would be if everybody just came to that realization of, oh yeah, this is exactly what I wanted.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and it's like, okay, it's like, all right, so it's exactly what I wanted. And now what? Right. And now do I feel better? Does it make me feel better? Like, or does it make me feel?
Or do I still want this? And how would I do this really from what I want?
Well, and it goes back to the whole shadow side stuff, right? It goes, and that's all duality. It's all, who would I be if I didn't have anything to bitch about? But who would I be if I had nothing to
Commiserate.
commiserate with others about, or
Right.
to complain about, or to vilify, right?
Or to overcome.
Or to overcome, right?
Right.
So when you get to a place, which many of us are starting to get there, to this place of actually everything's pretty damn good.
Or not, but that's how I prefer it.
Right. All right. Or I just totally accept it. Right.
Right. No unexpectedness.
Yeah. So it's like, okay. Right. And it's coming, but it's almost like, to say, well, we created this whole pandemic or whatever you want to call it, because it's really not a pandemic in my observance, but whatever it is, right? In this pandemic of craziness, I know that's a judgment, but you know what I mean? This pandemic of chaos, yeah, which is really what it is. And we've chosen it. And it's almost like, oh no, we're getting too close to resolving. And so, like, oh, we've got to create this, or we feel like we have to create the chaos to create the order from it, or whatever, right? We feel like we believe all these things.
Right. There has to be an event to bring about the change that we're looking for.
Yeah. And so, like Gloria's saying, does not allow for growth and change. But like, what's growth and change? Is it growth and change, or is it letting go and remembering?
Right. And accepting.
Right. Instead of like, oh, we have to attain growth, we have to attain change. It's like, what if we just let go of
and realize that we have everything?
Let go of the facades, right? And say, oh, well, yeah.
That's right. Let go of those cardboard cutouts we're busy holding up. Saying,
I know.
My world.
I think of a movie set, like the old Western movie sets with the facades.
Right.
And we were watching this ridiculously, goofy thing on Netflix over the weekend, on, I think it was late Friday night. And to just sort of take a break. And it was the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. Have you seen that?
I saw the first few seasons, I think.
So anyway, we had watched the whole show, but they came out with a little mini movie thing, right? And it's a movie where you get to choose the decisions that the characters make by like.
I'd heard about it.
Yeah, so it was really fun. So we were playing it, and we actually watched it 3 times because we wanted to play it through with all the options.
Different options.
Because that's what we are. But the funny part is, I was thinking about that, going, oh, well, we just had to go back and do it again. Oh, okay, we're going to do it again. We're going to do it. Well, that's what we do here. That's what we do embodied, right?
Exactly.
And it was so funny because after I watched that, everything I watched or saw on a TV or anything I saw in a conversation, I kept on thinking in the back of my mind, okay, what am I choosing on the remote right now? Like, what?
Exactly.
Right. Knowing I can come back and do this again, right? So even in the movie, it's funny because if you make a certain decision, like it goes to a certain point and then something implodes and it ends the whole story. And then one of the actors comes on and says, oh, you could make a better choice than that. Like it's sort of funny. Go back and do it again, or go back to this point and do it again. But the whole thing is, part of that is there is this one part in the story where you have Titus going to help Kimmy with something, but he's supposed to be in this movie. And then there's like all this, stuff in this pandemonium, and he's helping her out in these woods. And all of a sudden he has this experience where he sees this table of food in the middle of the woods, and he thinks he's hallucinating and blah, blah, blah. And he turns around and there's some like guy there, and he's like, hey, yeah, I'm the stagehand or whatever, because actually the movie he was shooting was filming in the same woods that he was helping her. He didn't even realize it. That's the whole goofy, whatever, how it comes together.
Right.
But then it's like, well, then what's the facade and what's not? That's the funny thing that came to me, right?
Right.
Like, oh, right. Well, so he's taking, 5 minutes to do his one scene in this movie so that he could go and then continue helping his friend. And it was no different. Like there was no more or less importance on anything.
Right.
So that's what we're doing, and that's what we do. What a great encapsulation of that.
Right.
And so what's interesting is, going back to what we talked about last week, and this thing I've talked about a lot, what we talked about last week about the whole idea of when you have two sides of a debate that are both just equally as weighted and equally as legitimate according to the mind, right? Then what's really right? It's what you choose. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's just, oh, I'm going to try this, or I'm going to go down this road. That's what we do in every life, right?
Right.
So, or every part of our existence, or every embodiment we choose. So, we get caught up in, what we talk about in energy work. When somebody comes to me with a chronic illness,
right,
and they ask me if I can help them, and I ask them if they're ready to really let go of it. And of course, the first answer is always, oh, yes, yes,
Oh, of
because
course.
it was
Right. I
so much
would do
easier
anything.
without it. And
Right.
I'm like, okay, but if it was not a part, could you imagine yourself if it was not a part of your identity? And that actually makes a lot of people hesitate.
Right.
Who are you then if you don't have that?
Right.
I look at, so here are a couple things. I used to suffer from a lot of allergies. Well, I shifted that within myself. I don't have that anymore, allergic
Right.
reactions to things, right? So I don't have any identity with people who continue on with their particular irritations, because I know they can change that. And I've
Right.
seen people do that for themselves. And then there's things like migraines, right? Which people think, oh, I have migraines, I'll always have them, whatever. I had migraines chronically for years and decided I was done with them. Shifted, that was when I started shifting my life into natural holistic stuff, and then all this other
Right.
whatever. I haven't had one in years. So I sit there and I have my two daughters who are in young adulthood, and they get migraines, and I tell them, you can change that, but they will not change their behaviors to change it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I used to do the migraine thing. Well, now they just have the once a month shot.
Well, that's the Band-Aids, right?
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. Nope.
And I'm like, well, you'll sit here and complain to me about getting migraines. You will kill your body by shoveling Advil in it and whatever else to try to appease the symptoms of the migraines, but you won't change what you're doing in your life.
Right.
Why is that? Because at some level you like who you are and where you are and what you're doing.
Right. Whether it's through a familial connection, whether it's through a sense of obligation,
Or
whether it's
martyrdom is a big one. Oh,
right,
I overstressed myself and then da 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 da
or
da.
it's a seeking attention.
Yes.
I mean, there's so many different things, and if you take judgment out of the picture, it's like, okay, well then address that,
Right.
address the need for the attention.
Right.
Maybe you're not paying enough attention to yourself.
Yeah. And many will say, oh yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, I can see that, but I have this. Like, and it's so funny. It's like, oh yeah, I can see like getting that, but I have this and this.
Right.
This
But
is
mine's different
I will always
because I'm
have this.
right. Which you are special. You've created it for yourself.
Right.
You've tailor made it for yourself.
Yes.
No, I fully have been looking at all aspects of my life through that lens
Yes.
of, and I take it back to that having as evidence of wanting. At what point do I want this? Because it's there somewhere.
Yeah. Well, yeah, why do I want it? And like, what is the cause of that? Right. Which is usually to feel special, to feel loved, because you don't feel special or loved without that.
Right.
Or that or because you don't love yourself enough. Right.
Yeah. Worthiness.
Yeah. Or again, it's like, or I'm only worthy if I'm connected in that familial manner. Oh,
right.
Well, I have this because all the women in my family have this.
Right.
Yeah, no. Nope.
Right.
Nope. Sorry. Love y'all. Don't need to be a part of that anymore. Right.
Right.
And so I know what that feels like. And it's for a while it takes an adjustment, because you have to adjust who you know yourself to be. Right.
Right.
Because it does necessitate, or not necessitate, but it creates this entire change of being, right, to a different place.
Right. And it almost requires a buy-in to believing that that's who you are, which trades off some of your own creativity or creative power.
Yeah. And so think about this. It comes to me. I don't know why this just popped into my mind. This is an interesting perception. So who is being idealized and romanticized right now are those people who have careers where they serve others.
Right.
Right. And so if we're coming into this place, and so like, what are we idealizing when people are helping others? And what are we idealizing? And this whole thing with the virus is, oh, you're not doing this for yourself. You're doing it for other people and people you care about too. And if you're not, you're being selfish. Right. See that all over the place. I even saw last night, I was laughing because I hadn't been on Facebook or social media pretty much all like from 3 or 4 days. And I saw like the new thing now, the new propaganda is, oh, well, people who don't wear masks are just like people who used to be like people who get mad about having to wear masks in public are the same as people who used to get mad about smoking in public, like when they outlawed smoking in public places.
Oh, yeah.
And I
Oh,
was like, oh yeah, no, that's a little bit of a different thing. But,
right. Hmm.
but I was like, interesting that now it's like, oh, well, okay, if that guilt did not make you feel bad, now I'm going to throw some make you look like even worse, right?
Right, right,
Today. But and I don't say that with any judgment, but that's the whole thing. And so right now we are totally romanticizing. We are totally idealizing. Oh, look at the service workers and the nurses and and even the people who are there, the people who are serving other people. Okay, because we needed to bring the martyrdom up front and
right,
center.
right,
I never saw it that way before until now. So that's very interesting. So we had to bring the martyrdom front and center to resolve that within ourselves to say, this doesn't really work when you sort of
right.
look at
And if you look at it also from the perspective of the whole picture, not just a story about a specific group or even a specific geographic location. I know lots of nurses who are being laid off because hospitals are shutting down
I know,
because they're
exactly.
empty.
Yeah, all over the country. Yeah.
So
I know. And so we're painting that facade. So that's what I'm talking about is like, there's so many cartoons right now. And I'm going, huh,
yeah,
and so it's like, okay, when do we come back to, and when did this all happen? This all happened as we collectively were growing into that space of that self-centeredness of unconditional self-love. Then that became such a big movement, right? And funny
right,
how that's not such a big movement right now. It doesn't seem to be, although many people in the spiritual community continue to say it, but it keeps on getting stomped down as, oh no, don't be selfish, right?
right, right,
You should be motivated by what other people think about you and how other people feel about you, not about how you feel about yourself.
right.
And it's like, well, no.
Well, and something you just said made me want to reduce my everyday movement through my day into like a decision tree. Literally flat, and I either do this or I do this.
Yeah.
Or I choose this or I choose this, because that's it. And if you take it that way, there's no, it's black and white, this or that, and there's no, bigger agenda coming in and creating your victimhood. It's just yourself making.
Well, yeah. Well, and again, what does it end up coming back to? Like, okay, I tell you how I always feel like we're a broken record talking about this, but it comes back to listening to your guidance, listening to the higher voice, not a judgment call. A judgment call is ego. So when the higher self says, yeah, this is what there is for you to do. That's it.
Right.
There's not a not with higher self. Higher self is from the higher perspective. This is what there is to do. This is what there is to be. And the nots don't even exist because nots, well, that's that whole like negative, the duality thing, right?
Exactly.
So if it's like, okay, this is what there is for you to do, you see the choices, and if you just follow them from the guidance and without saying, because what we end up saying is, well, what should I do? Or what's better?
Right.
And what's one we talk about all the time? What's highest and best? Well, that's still a judgment, right?
Right. Right.
But what's there for me to do? So here's the thing. I trust my guidance over any propaganda that's in this facade of a cartoon reality that we have right now, right? And so what's interesting is that, it's like, okay, and maybe that's why we're coming to this place of detachment, because when we're detached and in that place of unconditional self-love, right?
Right.
Then we don't have to prove ourselves to anybody.
Right. Yeah, and there's no need for any judgment.
And if I'm guided to do something, or if I'm guided to do something else than what somebody else is doing, that does not indicate judgment in any way. It just simply is what it is. It just,
Right.
and I trust that it's perfect, because here's the thing, you and I are the same. We're just different facets of the same consciousness. We're just different embodiments of the same consciousness. And again, it goes back to that trusting that the symphony is perfect and everything else. And it's like, okay, so for us to really come to that full realization of that note that we came here to embody is to fully embed ourselves in that self-centeredness of unconditional self-love. Because when I do that, I can't do anything but love you or anybody else.
Right. Right.
And I can't do anything that would try to judge your journey, because I don't judge my own anymore, because I trust and I, come from a place of love. And
Right.
if I love myself, then I can't do anything but love you. If I truly love myself, I can't do anything but love other people.
Right. And respect their journey, but that doesn't mean that you have to participate or buy into
Yes.
their choices.
And that is where there's a weird disconnect or disjointed feeling right now, because it's that was the whole observation of, well, I love everybody here sitting at this table.
Right.
And I see what's being played out here in these interactions and what's being said and what's being reached for. And I just don't feel the need to be a part of it. I can observe it.
Participate.
My guidance isn't to do anything. And it was funny because the ego sure as hell wanted to say something, but the guidance was like, yeah, no, don't. Yeah, my news thing is, I don't know, the show The Goldbergs, which I love, right? There was like one episode we watched like the other week, and the dad said, yeah, nah. And ever since he said that, I was like, yeah, no, that's such a like, New England thing. I grew up with that. I was like, yeah, and so my husband and I, we joke every time that happens now. I just look at him and go, yeah, nah.
Right.
Yeah, nah. So that's what I've been doing. And so it's a very uncomfortable, I think, to the ego, right? But it is a part of us being the example to stay in that place of trust and unconditional love, right? Because I was looking at stuff, like a lot of stuff that's coming up. We have a lot of movies and a lot of, TV and stuff, whatever, that of shows that put people in situations where they're facing, and a lot of stuff that's like sci-fi, fantasy stuff now, whatever. The people get into a situation where they can't believe what they see, right? So they're panicked because they can't believe what they see. What if this is a preparation for us to step into what's next? Because I feel like what's next is even bigger than what's here and here now.
Absolutely.
Right? And so if we accepted that what's next is even hugely bigger than where there is now, then for us to navigate it clearly, oh yeah, that comes back to the guidance I had gotten back in like the end of last year, which is, yeah, all you need to do is know how to navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When we were looking at the conspiracy theory stuff before any of this hit and all that stuff. And I had asked, well, what's the purpose? Like, why does this keep on getting put in front of me? Yeah, for you to navigate it.
Right.
Oh. And so maybe that's what we're doing to ourselves, is we're sort of immersing ourselves with so much of it. It's like, not to become numb to it, but to become unreactive to it, to become observant to it without the reaction.
Right.
Yeah, that feels good.
Yeah.
Because what's next is even more unbelievable, right? But it would not like have any context. We have no context, like that we could even imagine. Like, I hate to start saying that, because when you and I started talking about this in January, this ended up happening.
That's right.
But I feel like what's next is so out of context, even more so that it's so, we set this up for ourselves to retrain ourselves to be able to not attach to it.
Right.
And to see the facade for what it is, to see the cartoon for what it is, and to know that regardless of what all that looks like, we still create everything in our reality. And it's our choice. It's our creation.
Right.
Yeah, that feels better. That feels actually good. The retraining, the remembering.
Right.
And that's where I feel like a lot of people do feel like they're like, okay, I feel like I'm floating in stasis, I'm disjointed, and and that's where we were a little lost, but it's really not bad. Like we try to judge, we try to judge it as bad because it's like, oh no, well, like the ego makes these connections. Well, this equals this equals this equals bad, right?
Right.
Well, that's what we do.
A plus B plus C equals bad.
Right. Like your decision tree, right? This
Right.
side is good and this side is bad. So your decisions, right?
Right. Right.
And so it's like, okay, so if we take out that judgment, again, like I've been doing on my Thursday podcast, is like, okay, let's put judgment on the shelf for this period of time and just look at it just completely as the creator, which is what we are, right? As the divine consciousness, which is what we are. There's no judgment there.
Right.
It just is. So what are my choices? Instead of asking, what should I do? What are my choices? What is there for me to do?
Right. I like that better.
Yeah. And that makes me think of the Kimmy Schmidt thing, which was funny. It was so goofy. It was dumb, but it really brought that front and center for me because I was just thinking, then everything I did after, I was like, oh, can I just pick up the remote and change the choice?
Right. Right.
You know, because we do, that is what we're doing. That's what we're playing out.
Well, and it's really funny how, we talk about people who say, well, if I could just have this, then I'd be happy. And then, in some ways, if they do get that and they're still like, oh, well, now I'm still not happy. Well, okay, then it was this, then it was this. Well, that's that whole facade thing until you get to that place where you're beyond the facades.
Exactly. So
it's just a series of TV shows.
Well, art is an imitation of life, right?
Right.
So, I mean, all of that. And I remember years ago, somebody who I knew said to me, everything, she said to me, everything I understand, as I understand it, everything that is written has been written, as a movie, book, story, anything has happened or is happening someplace in the multiverse.
Yep.
To which, of course, my first response was, oh, yeah, so that means Hogwarts does exist somewhere.
Right. Well, and I saw somewhere where they've proven that there's a parallel universe, but that time is going backwards there.
Oh,
I didn't click on that link.
That's pretty funky. Yeah, and I keep on seeing, and it's almost like we're starting to see glimpses of that. We're almost starting to see, oh, look, if I clicked on the remote for this choice, this is how it plays out. Like I can see that now a lot more clearly than I've ever seen.
And I can see that playing out in my life, and that I used my version of free will as my remote. Mm-hmm. I'd like to experience this.
Right.
So I'm going to click this button on that remote so I can go this way on my little decision tree.
Well, and by the way, in another timeline, you pop out another timeline to say, and I'm going to choose this in this timeline and see how it all resolves that way. Right.
Right.
Because regardless of the choices you make in the movie, it ends up ending in the same place pretty much, just with slightly different, slightly different things. And, it was funny, on my thing on Thursday, I was asked, what about free will? And I said, well, free will is also a perception of the ego, because free will is by saying I have a choice that creates duality and exclusion of a not choice, right? And so it's really the ego just playing in all the creations of possibility, which is what we try to define as free will.
Right.
But that's with exclusion usually in the perception that I choose this and not this. But when you look at ourselves as the divine consciousness, we actually choose all of it. So there really is no free will or no need for it, because we make all the choices.
Right. Right. It's like those, I've seen quotes where if there was no wrong choice, what would you choose?
Right.
And which is where we are.
Yeah.
And it's like all roads lead back to the same thing, that you are all powerful, you are all love, you are all everything.
Right.
No
And
matter
then
if
you
you're
have,
this or this on your little decision chart.
and we go back to what we talked to last week about each, like say, like right now, because we have these so many things out there that are causing such huge debates, right? That
Right.
really, if you look at it objectively, that there's like a heavy supportive argument on both sides, and there's on both sides. So there's no real clear right or wrong. It's simply what you're guided to do. And so
Right.
the thing is, if you're guided to do something, then just own it.
Right. Right.
And that's been something I've been kicked in the butt to do for years now, is if you just choose this, then choose it. Don't excuse yourself, don't rationalize it, you don't have to explain it. And that was
Right.
actually part of what came up last night in the conversation, and they were waiting for it. It was like I was being tried, like they were trying to draw me into explaining certain decisions I had made based on like this conversation we're having. And I was just like, I just did.
Right. End of conversation.
And that just made them all crazy, because I'm like, I don't have to explain myself to you. Right. And it had
Right.
nothing to do with this pandemic. It was just a conversation we were having, but it was just something I was very observant about. And I was just like, and it was almost like the whole family, the whole table got deflated because I wouldn't engage.
Right. Took away the opportunity for
That
engagement.
debate, you know,
Right. Debate.
because they're like, oh, come on, because you debate that, like, because that's part of, and I admit years, like we have always really loved to debate in my and I just don't have that urge anymore. So I just like, we'll
Right.
sit and watch it. Okay. And sometimes I'll throw in a perspective to sort of be what they call the devil's advocate. Like I'll just say, well, what about this perspective then? I've started doing that more than anything else, because it's just sort of fun to see. But a choice is a choice. And right now, like we are trying, like it is so interesting to look at that, how that martyrdom, how that sacrifice to force other people, which is forcing ourselves to do something based on what other people judge of us, right?
Right.
That's brought that martyrdom front and center to say, this doesn't make sense from a divine perspective. And so it's time to resolve it, I think, and to come to a place of really complete comfort with that being, right? And to accept and know and trust, right? That's what I think part of the biggest challenge for us is that trusting,
Right.
that having no propulsion based on the old duality based, propulsion methods of lack and whatever, and drive to something. That we can create and evolve and expand from that center point. See, because what I'm seeing is like when you do that, it expands out in all directions holographically.
Right. Which that's your propulsion, is that expansion.
Yes.
Versus, oh, I have to go over here to experience this, and then over here to experience that. Whereas if it's an expansion, it's all of it.
And whenever you do that,
that feels really good.
It feels really good. It does. Because whenever you do, oh, I'm just going to go over here and do this and take this line, then you exclude all of these other
exactly
things.
Yep. Your choice is exclusionary.
It makes that think of
include and exclude.
Makes me think of the Taurus, right? The energetic Taurus.
Right.
Oh, that feels so good.
That feels
God. Ding, 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 ding.
Okay, I think we hit it.
We hit it. So whatever it is for us to remember how to be from there, right? How to do from there in that holographic way. Oh, that feels so incredible. Oh, it's almost like I just got oxygen in my lungs.
Right? That feels tremendous.
Okay, so whatever it is for us to be able to remember that. Oh, and trust it and be it and do it and all that. Let's do it. I could just kept going out and out and out.
I know.
I was glad my phone buzzed and sort of shocked me back here because then I was like, oh yeah. There was a bunch of chattering and questions and whatever in the beginning. And then
Yep.
I kept on seeing or hearing like, oh no, not me, or no, that's not me, and it's like, but it is. It's all of us. Come on in. And
Right.
it's like this big group hug, which is what everybody needs right now.
Right.
So, and then it was like, oh look, it all melts together, and then oh look, it all expands out, and oh look, that's so easy. And then it felt so nice. Oh, so it was like liquid velvet, just beautiful.
Right. It was like gentle waves.
Yeah,
Yeah. Very nice.
very nice. Oh, I'm glad we came to that. That was beautiful.
Yep.
So be that. That's our message for this week is be that.
Right.
Yeah, let's just start practicing that above everything else. Because once we do that, everything else just sort of becomes easier, I feel.
Yeah. You realize everything's already in place.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is Angela Coulter and
Sarah Sieg Avignoni.
bringing you this week's Ascended World. See you next time.